And welcome to our 10-minute pre-show for today's 220-11-02 A+ study group. It looks like we've got recordings going. Folks are here in the chat room. Hello, chat room. Good to see you. We're checking cameras. Those look good. Maybe fix this just a bit. I think we've got everything in place for today's 1102 study group. I've got all new questions. Let's make sure the laptop comes on. There it is. So I think we're in really good shape. Hope everybody's doing well. We have a lot going on this week. We obviously had a live stream yesterday for the 1101. Today's the 1102. I'm taking Wednesday and not doing a live stream this week. Normally I do one, maybe two live streams in a week. This week we're doing four of them. So Wednesday is our bye day. We're not doing anything live on Wednesday. I have plenty of things I will be doing on Wednesday. Doing a live stream is not one of those. And then Thursday and Friday, we have live streams. Thursday is Network Plus and Friday is Security Plus. Hopefully we can stick to that schedule. We may have to move some things around. You should always check the calendar and see what's going on. Hope everybody's doing well. Haven't seen some of you in a while. Some of you were here yesterday. Thank you for being here. So we've got a lot to go through. Hope the chat room's doing well. Hello, Malk. Haven't seen you in a while. Hope things are going well. This is a very busy time for me. I feel like the camera angle, I need to work on this. You notice some things have been moved around and I've had to adjust and make changes, and I'm just not sure where everything is or should be at this point. We're working on it. We're figuring it out. I don't know exactly how we will get there, but we will get there nonetheless. Hopefully we've got you everybody ready to go. We have a lot of questions. These are all brand new questions that I've got ready in this first hour, so it should be interesting. I've also got I've already got the schedule up for next month, so it seems like that's one of those things to think about. We've got a lot going on here, and we're sort of in the middle of transitioning between these different configurations of the studio. So hopefully that gives you some perspective of what we are doing. Now, everything looks great here with the stream. For those of you that are having stream issues, remember that I'm not sending you the stream. YouTube is. So anything that you're seeing on your side for lagging or issues associated with that may be associated with your link to YouTube. So I would recommend a different browser, recommend a different video setting. You can click the cog wheel at the bottom of your YouTube window. You might want to change the resolution. Maybe you have a limited bandwidth available at the moment. So you can tune it down a little bit to, I think we're broadcasting at 1080p because that is one of the fastest ways to do this. There's very little latency between the time I say something and the time you hear it. So you could take it down to 720 or even 480 and even lower if you had to. So there's options there. I'm looking at, and you kind of see over my shoulder, this cache number. That's the 3% number that's normally there. That tells me that everything is working as expected to YouTube, that I am sending data at a very standard rate. There's a very small amount of information that is cached on this side. And if this ever changes, and there are times when it does, I know that something is causing latency to YouTube. And then, of course, you would see it on your side as well. YouTube has different things they do to minimize the impact on your side, but there's very little I can do. There is a primary streaming address that I can send everything to, and that's what's being sent to currently. There's also a backup or a secondary address you can also send information to. I normally don't switch over to the backup unless there is just nothing else that can be done. And usually that doesn't help either because the problems are with my network and not with the YouTube services. So that's one of those situations. But anyway, we are starting at the top of the hour. We've got about 5 minutes to go until the top of the hour. So we will get things going here in just a moment. I like to start a little early, even though you're looking at the back of my head. You will see me eventually as we get started here. But right now it's me making sure that recordings are going. You can sort of see the silence down here. I make sure that the stream is working as expected. And this, of course, has been up and running to YouTube for quite a while, probably at least 10, 15 minutes before we go live. So I usually will turn this on and just watch it and make sure that it is working as expected, which is not always the case. Sometimes there are glitches, there's dropouts. You have no control over the network. Even the final mile of the network is not one you can really have a lot of control over. So it's really important that I'm able to monitor that and see what's going on. And we have had significant outages of the network during live streams. You just kind of have to work through them. That's just the nature of the business, it seems. There are options available for backups. I haven't really, in where I am now, I have a few more options available. So I'm trying to figure out what would be a good backup. Would it be the AT&T 5G network? Would it be Starlink? Would it be a separate DSL type connection if available? There's all different things you can do. I just haven't decided on what those would be yet. The market for that backup and high bandwidth is a good one. It's changing constantly right now. So we have to figure this out. As you can see, also over my shoulder, currently the data rate that I am sending to YouTube is approximately 6 megabits per second. So there's a good bit of traffic going out right now. And to be fair, the network that I am on at the moment is one that is relatively slow in the world of high-speed internet. I only have a 100 megabit down and 100 megabit upstream at the moment. That will be upgraded in the future, but that's what I'm currently running. Interestingly enough, in our previous last month on that stream, my upload speed was maxed at around 20 to 25 megabits per second, and the current speed that I am on now is 100 megabits per second. So it's one of those situations. If you are having issues with not seeing things properly, or something looks weird, or you're just not happy with it, change your resolution. It's in this particular case, it's not me, it's you kind of scenario. Everything here from the YouTube side is working great, as you can see with the explanation that I just gave. So we got 3 minutes, 2 minutes really to go. I should probably make sure that we put things up on your side so you can see things like this. Maybe you want to put a pin in this to be able to see this. We'll show the results. So if you wanted to put a pin in on where you are, simply visit professormesser.com/QA. There it is. And you can put your pin into the map, show other people where it happens to be. We'll have to get to that point as well. We got a lot to step through today, so hopefully you're ready for some 220.1102 questions. I've got all brand new stuff. It's usually pretty good whenever we're working through these. I've got, this is up 1 minute here, a minute and a half really. Won't be using this. I think we're in good shape. Oh, so glad everyone's here. Thanks for joining us. I know that this schedule this month has been just ridiculous, so I appreciate everybody showing up and enjoying the live stream. It's not something that we can predict, these changes in one's life. We can't predict it always, so I appreciate your flexibility. We just never know what it might be. Yes, the current config for Q&A is right there on the screen. We have 1 minute left for this update, and then we'll get started with the live stream. You can, of course, join the study group. Join. We've got, yes, it is true that this is a different configuration. It's the Vevox app. So hopefully you're in there with the Vevox app working through that one. Let's get things ready to go on the graphics. Got about a little bit more to go. If there's any questions or anything that you have that you would like me to answer in the second hour, the Q&A is always open on Vevox. You can always leave a message there or a question there, and then I sift through those at the end of the first hour to find the questions you would like me to answer in the second hour. So, and you're more than welcome to hit the tab at the top of your screen and leave a question at any time during the live stream, just so you are aware. Well, with that, it is indeed top of the hour. Let's get my keynote going here. Let's get a green light. There it is. And let's get things started with this side. And it's time for a live stream, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2024 Professor Messer 2201102 A+ study group. My name is James Messer, and you're coming to this live stream with an hour of Q&A that I will be providing to you. It all comes from the exam objectives that are from the official CompTIA exam objectives. So you know that everything we'll be covering today is indeed coming from the topics that you might find on your 2201102 exam. We have a lot of things to go through today. Let me first remind you that this is a live stream and you can participate live. There's questions that you are able to answer live. And of course, I have one for you right now. This is one that you can go pop open a new browser window and visit the URL that's on your screen, which is professormesser.com/QA. That is the URL that will get you to the questions that we have available for this particular live stream. This first question we do is just to see if you're able to get into the Q&A and answer some of the questions that are here. The question that I've got is from last month. That's why we call it a rewind question. And this rewind question asks, a Windows user is running the defrag command. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Is it transfer a database to a SAN, compress files to save space, commit changes to the Windows registry, increase storage drive throughput, or restart and install patches? Now, if you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. That is an important one. So remember to put your answer into the live stream, and we will come back to this question in just a moment. Thank you for being here. As I mentioned, we do one of these study groups every month. One of the things that we like to do is to involve you in the process, and it's kind of fun to do a Q&A in that first hour. But of course, we're not always here doing a live stream. You can see our entire video training course is available on YouTube. You can visit that to go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have daily pop quiz questions for A+. You can find those on Twitter and Instagram by simply visiting professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. Today, all of the questions will come from exam topics specific to the 2201102 exam. This was an exam that was released in April of 2022. Its estimated retirement date is November of 2025. Now, we've got, as part of this exam, quite a lot of content. You can see that we've got 1102 requires you to get a score of 700. So that's a lot of questions to go through. The scale on this exam is between 100 and 900. That's a little bit more than the 1101 exam where you have to score 675. So you have to do a little bit better on the 1102 than you did the 1101. Regardless, once you pass both of these exams, you are A+ certified for 3 years. So that's one of the benefits of having all of this done and in your pocket is you now get to keep that certification for 3 years. And many people will then, of course, renew that certification for another 3 years after that. So you should never have to take this exam again. Of course, you can if you really, really want to, but you don't have to. The 1102 exam consists of the topics that you see on the right side here. So the questions we have for you today will be about operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So we'll go through and show you everything that we have for questions, and we tend to step through each one of those. So we'll try to cover those multiple times during this session today. Don't forget that we have a video replay of this available immediately afterwards. I also create an audio-only replay in podcast form. So if you're driving in the car, you're working out, and you just want to listen in, this audio-only podcast is one that can be automatically downloaded to your podcast listening app on your mobile device, or you may want to visit your favorite streaming site like Spotify and simply search for Professor Messer. You'll find our podcast is there as well. And if there is a site where you would like to have our podcast, let me know, and I'll be glad to add that to whatever site that might be. I'll try anyway. We'll see what we can do about getting that done. There will also be, usually this happens relatively quickly. This will happen about a week after you see this video live. You'll see a list of timestamps magically appear thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. She watches this entire video, and Lori, she goes through the whole thing and puts these timestamps in for you. Normally, she's off this week, so normally we get these done pretty quick, but she's going to come back next week, and I will just have a pile of live streams that she has to go through. Hopefully she won't be too tired of it by the time we're done with these. So look for that in your YouTube video description, and that will be coming soon. Also let you know that when we're not here live, you can probably find me in Discord. Discord is our Q&A and a great way to interact and network with other people who are also going through their certification studies. You'll find people there studying for A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other certifications, and you can start your own study group with the click of a mouse. It's all built in. You have complete control. It's all available on our Discord. Simply visit professormesser.com/Discord. I will also tell you that eventually you will need to take this exam. And if you are in the US or Canada, I would love to give you a discounted voucher. Why would you pay full price for the vouchers on the CompTIA website when you can visit professormesser.com/vouchers and you can get a voucher for a discounted price? You don't need a discount code. You don't need an extension in your browser. It's just always discounted. It's available at professormesser.com/vouchers. I'll also let you know that if you buy it on my site, not only do you get the voucher for a less expensive cost, you also get a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook for free. This contains a list of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years of not only preparing for the exam, but things you can do during the exam to potentially help your score. That's available for free if you purchase from professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's talk about this question that was here earlier, which is, a Windows user is running the defrag command. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would this be to transfer a database to a SAN, compress files to save space, commit changes to the Windows registry, increase storage drive throughput, or restart and install patches? So the real question is, do you remember what the answer was from last month? Let's see what people put in as their answer. You could see that almost like last month, we're a little torn on this particular question. You can see that we've got 54% of you that say the answer is to increase the storage drive throughput. 37% of you say it is to compress files to save space. 5% said this will commit changes to the Windows registry. And then about a percentage say restart and install patches or transfer the database to a SAN. So the defrag command stands for disk defragmentation. This is one that takes different pieces of the file that are scattered among a hard drive, and it brings all of those pieces back so that they are all in a contiguous order. That means you can have, instead of separate pieces located everywhere, we bring them all together and put them all back together again so they are all in one place, which is, of course, a benefit if you are trying to read information from a rapidly spinning drive. It'd be nice if everything was in the same place. That can save some time when you're trying to read or write data to that drive. And that's the real benefit of disk defragmentation, is that it is speeding up the process of reading data. It is also speeding up the process of writing the data. But an important consideration is that it's not changing any of this data. It's not modifying how much data is being used. It's not modifying how much drive space you have on your drive. It's not changing anything with the available resources. It's only changing where this single bit of data happens to exist, where it lives on that drive. We're just moving things around. So instead of it being a puzzle, we're bringing the puzzle all back together so that we can really see the image there. So that's the real benefit of having this. Obviously, SSDs don't have this delay. There's no spinning drive in an SSD, so you don't have to run defragment when you have an SSD on your systems. SSD is rapidly becoming a utility that we simply no longer need to use because we're no longer running as many spinning hard drives. So the answer here, even though we were a little torn, is the one that did get the majority of the percentage. The increased storage drive throughput. That is exactly what it does, because we're able to write information and read information much faster if the drive has been defragmented. And as I mentioned, we're not changing the data. We're not compressing anything. We're not expanding anything. We're not creating new space out of nothing. We are not compressing files to save space. So unfortunately, the 37% of you that chose that one did not choose the correct answer. So sorry. 5% said commit changes to the Windows registry. The defrag command has nothing to do with the Windows registry. It also has nothing to do with transferring a database to a storage area network. Only less than 1% of you chose that one. And about 1% also said restart and install patches, which again, a very important thing to do, but it has nothing to do with the defrag command. Defrag is the defragmentation, and that's the utility that you would use to be able to improve the performance of your storage drive. So now you're able to get into our Q&A. You now see that there is a system here for being able to use this Q&A, and it is a feature that we can now use to do some new questions. And of course, the first new question of every study group is one that is a performance-based question. So it's not a multiple choice. The question we just did was a multiple choice, where there was a question and then multiple choices to select from. But the first handful of questions you get on your exam will not be multiple choice. They will be, well, anything else other than multiple choice. The term that CompTIA uses is performance-based questions. So I have for you a performance-based question. This one happens to be a matching question. So let's start our performance-based, our brand new question of the month. This is going to be difficult to see with my big head in the way, but you'll be able to break this down and see it, okay? The question asks, match the Windows utility to the description. So let's step through each of these utilities and what the descriptions are and see where we might match them up. One of the things you'll notice is that I have 7 utilities listed and I only have 4 descriptions. That means there will be some left over at the end. And maybe we can step through what's left over and see if we can figure out what those would be used for. For those of you listening in, these are the 7 utilities. They are NSLOOKUP, TraceRT, DiskPart, Format, NetUse, GPResult, and XCopy. Those are the utilities. And here are the descriptions that you would use in these utilities. The first description is transfer data from a file server to a remote site. That's what that says. Hard to see with me in the way, but that's what it says. The second description is view the IP address of www.professormesser.com. The third description is associate a Windows share with a drive letter. And the last description is count the number of routers between 2 devices. Now, if you think you know what the matching is, you can simply submit this. This is a fill in the blank effectively online. And if you think they're already in the right order, you simply have to put in 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and you're done. Now, obviously, they are not in that particular order, but you don't have to type in the entire names of everything, I guess, unless you really, really would like to. But the easy way is to simply type in 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, or whatever the matching might be. Again, for those of you listening in on the podcast side, the utilities are NSLOOKUP, TraceRT, DiskPart, Format, NetUse, GPResult, and XCopy. And then the descriptions are transfer data from a file server to a remote site, view the IP address of www.professormesser.com, associate a Windows share with a drive letter, and count the number of routers between 2 devices. That's what you need to put in. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Use the link that's on your screen to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. No hints in the chat room, no answers in the chat room. It'll be as if we are taking the exam in the exam room. We can't Google this. We can't get help from others. We have to do everything ourselves. Speaking of which, let's step through each one of these now and see if we can match them up, see what's left over, And then maybe we can also figure out what the leftover utilities might be used for. Let's start with the very first description that we have here, which is transfer data from a file server to a remote site. And of these 7 different utilities that we have of NSLOOKUP, TraceRT, DiskPart, Format, NetUse, GPResult, and XCopy, the only one that seems to fit the bill is the last one on this list, XCopy. And indeed, XCopy is a very capable copy command. It is an extended copy capability, so you can take the original copy command that was in Windows, indeed in the DOS days, and we improved on copy to create XCopy, which was able to copy a lot more, copy subdirectories, and do a lot more for us. Of course, if you really wanted to have a very capable copy command, you would use robocopy, which of course stands for robust copy. But of course, robocopy was not in our list of 7 items, so we would not have been able to match it. The only one that really makes sense to match in this particular description to transfer data from a file server to a remote site would be number 7, XCopy. The next on our list is view the IP address of www.professormesser.com. So this is one where being able to see the IP address is not something you normally have access to. So how would you gather the IP address of www.professormesser.com? You need to look up that information on a name server, and the utility to do that is NSLOOKUP. There are other utilities to do this. For example, dig is another popular utility to be able to do this. But NSLOOKUP, of course, is what you would use to be able to perform a number of queries to a DNS server and be able to see what the results of those queries happen to be. A very capable utility, and because all of your outages are a DNS problem, I think we all know this, it's very important that you understand how to use that NSLOOKUP utility. All right, maybe not all of them, but 99% of them, right? It's a DNS problem. It's always a DNS problem. Next on our list is associate a Windows share with a drive letter. Now, Windows share obviously is the section of a storage drive or an area of a storage drive that is being made public or being made available to others. And we would normally access that by using either the fully qualified naming convention for that or using a drive letter. And we can associate a drive letter in our Windows with that particular share by using the NetUse utility. It's technically the net utility. The use part is one of the functions of the net utility. The net utility is very capable, has a number of different functions, especially as it relates to Windows. But the use command is one that allows you to designate a drive letter to a share. That way you don't have to remember that it's //server1 /share drive / or whatever it happens to be. Instead, you can simply use NetUse. Although I guess with the UNCs, it's all /, isn't it? So either way, the nice thing about Windows, it will take any type of designation like that. You can use hyphens if you wanted to, and it would work. But NetUse is the one that you would use to put that drive letter and associate it with the share. Next on the list is, and the last one on the list is, count the number of routers between 2 devices. The number of routers between 2 devices. Normally, you don't know how many routers are between 2 individual devices, especially across the internet. So one of the utilities that's able to document this would be the traceroute utility. It's abbreviated in Windows as traceRT. TraceRT is what you would use. The TraceRT utility is very capable. It's one that provides you with a view of exactly what routes are between your IP address and the destination IP address. And that's the one you would like to use to be able to see just how many hops or routes you are away from a particular location. Now, this also means that there are other utilities here that we did not select. We had a number of these. For example, DiskPart, Format, and GPResult were not selected for any of these. There are options you can use for those. DiskPart is abbreviated a disk partitioning utility. This is a way not only to partition a drive, but to perform a number of different functions to the drive at the command line. If you've ever been in Windows and you've right mouse clicked on a drive and you looked at the properties, you know there's also functionality within there to start the disk configuration utility. You can view it graphically on your screen, but you don't always have the luxury of manipulating and viewing and managing these drives from the graphical front end. We also need a way to do this at the command line, and it's the disk part command that allows you to do that at the command line. We've also got the format utility. Format utility is not something you would normally use because you do this once to initialize a drive, and then you would not really use it again. Initializing a drive is pretty important if you're putting data on it, but of course it clears data when you use the format command. So don't use the format command unless you're really, really sure that you want to potentially delete everything on that particular drive. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. This is something that's also available in the graphical front end, but the format command is something we can use at the command line. And then lastly, we have GP result. Well, the group policy within Windows is an amazing functionality that allows a system administrator to manage hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of devices all from one single management screen. It allows you to set policies and push those policies out to different devices. And if you would like to see if a device is using the policies that you have configured, you may want to get a result of everything that particular system is following from a group policy perspective. And the way that you would view that is by using the GP result command. So that is what we would use. That is the option available for those. So all of these, the Xcopy, NSLOOKUP, NetUse, traceroute, disk part format, and GP result, were all available. The only ones we didn't use were disk part format and the GP result at the end. Hopefully that's given you some matching options to go through. This is only a small number of the command lines that you need to know for the 22011-02 exam. Make sure you look at the exam objectives and you go through all of the available command lines and you understand how these commands are used and when you might want to use them. You don't have to know a lot about the intricate settings of each of these commands, but you should know that if you were trying to resolve a particular problem, what the first command might be that you might want to pull from. So that is our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you did pretty well on that. I will tell you, this does come up, that some of you got all 4 of these matched properly. Some of you got less than 4 matched properly because we had 7 different options to choose from. CompTIA has said that on certain questions, they may or may not provide partial credit. So I would like to think that a question like this would give us partial credit. But again, I'm not the one scoring the exam. And ultimately, CompTIA doesn't tell us how they score the exam. So you'll never know whether you got partial credit or not. We can all just sort of hope for the best and see how it works out. Let's do another question. We're going to shift gears now back to a multiple choice based question. A multiple choice based question, of course, is one where there is a single question and then multiple options to choose from. This question is one that asks, which of the following would be the best way to make a configuration change from the console on a remote Linux server? Would that be SSH, MSRA, VPN, FTPS, or RDP? Got a few things to choose from there, and they're all abbreviations. Which of the following would be the best way to make a configuration change from the console on a remote Linux server? Is it SSH, MSRA, VPN, FTPS, and RDP? These are the things that we need to now figure out. So choose your option. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We instead want to go to the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. See what you think this is. A lot of people putting in their answer quickly on this one. I'm wondering if we happen to know what this one is. So we'll see if we know it or if we don't know it. This is a pretty good one to step through. So hopefully, in fact, you may be in a position where you have to use this function. Someone's asked you to make a configuration change on the console of a remote Linux server. What are you going to use? What's the option? What do you think is there? So we'll see if you happen to know what that is. Lock in your question by visiting professormesser.com/QA. See if you happen to know what this one is. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to make a configuration change from the console on a remote Linux server? Is it SSH, MSRA, VPN, FTPS, or RDP? We're going to close that poll and see how we do. 60% of you, just over the majority, say SSH. That's a pretty good number, but we have a good showing at 22, almost 23% of you say the answer is RDP. 8% say MSRA. We've got 2% that say VPN, and then 5% for FTPS. So the three in the middle got very little, but the 60% on top for SSH was almost overwhelming from that perspective. And if you've ever done anything with Secure Shell or SSH, then you're probably very familiar with this, especially on something like Linux, where the SSH client and server tend to be built in to the type of platform or the type of distribution that you're using for Linux. This is a utility that and protocol that allows you to have encrypted communication to the console of a remote device. So that makes it really almost very specific. We do need to have SSH as a service running on that remote device, and if we do, we can connect to it with an SSH client. And there's SSH clients available and SSH servers for that perspective available for many different devices and operating systems. You can find SSHs available in a lot of places. This is why we would not want to use something like Telnet. Telnet is not encrypted, and that's not what we want to use either. We want to use a technology that provides us with security when we're doing this. So let's see how you do with using SSH in the future. That should be the default, because the question talked about making a configuration change. It needed to be on the console, and it needed to be on a remote Linux server. So there's not a lot of options available when you have that specifics. And in fact, it's very quick to simply use a terminal screen to go in and be able to work through that. This is one where you had other options. RDP was an option. The remote desktop protocol is one that's a very popular option available in Windows, but a Linux server is not going to have a remote desktop service running on it, since that is a Microsoft service. So we would not be able to use remote desktop for this either. So that's not what we would choose. MSRA, the Microsoft Remote Assistance utility that's built into a number of Windows versions, it's almost like a user-initiated remote desktop session, which effectively is what it is. It's also something that's specific to Windows, and this question was asking specifically about Linux. So we know it would not be MSRA. We've also got FTPS, that is FTP Secure, a great utility for transferring files, but it does nothing to provide you with a way to make configuration changes on a console of a remote Linux device. It might allow you to transfer files to that remote Linux server, but we needed to go to the console and make a configuration change. And then lastly, a VPN, a virtual private network, is a way that you could create an encrypted tunnel between two devices, but that's all it does. It doesn't provide us with a way to make configuration changes, modify an operating system, or do anything else to that OS. That simply just creates the tunnel. So it would not be VPN either. The answer, and the one we were looking for, was indeed Secure Shell, SSH, and 60% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another question. I've got more here. This next question is one that asks, a Windows admin is running a utility found in Control Panel Administrative Tools. Which of the following would they be using? Would they be using Device Manager, Event Viewer, Internet Options, Indexing Options, or Power Options? These are the things we need to know when we are sitting down to do some troubleshooting on a device, is where we would find some of these utilities. So this question almost asks the reverse of that. A Windows admin is running a utility found in Control Panel Administrative Tools. Which of the following would they be using? Would they be using Device Manager, Event Viewer, Internet Options, Indexing Options, or Power Options? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. We'll have to see if you happen to remember what those are. Hopefully you're familiar with the control panel, and hopefully you're familiar with the administrative tools function inside the control panel, because there is a limited number of utilities available in those administrative tools. I may have said too much already. We'll see how we do with the answer on this one. Lock in what you believe the answer is by visiting professormesser.com/QA. And let's see what you think this answer might be. This is a number of different utilities. All of these are real utilities. All of these are things you do need to know that come directly from the exam objectives. So if you don't recognize any of these names, make sure you go back and do a little more research on those. Let's see how you did with this question. We've effectively got a tie. We have 45% of us say Event Viewer, 42% of us say Device Manager, and then we have 6% for Indexing Options, about 4.5% for Power Options, and then 1% for Internet Options. Well, I guess a good place to start then would be the Administrative Tools window inside of the control panel. Why don't we have a look at those? And here is a list of these different utilities. We have quite a few to choose from in this list. You can see everything from computer management, event viewer, local security policy, registry editor, services is in here, task scheduler, everything that you might think might be inside of the administrative tools function. So if you're someone who's doing troubleshooting on a system, you'll probably use some of the utilities that are available inside of administrative tools. Now, the two that we got the most number of votes on was Device Manager and Event Viewer. So if we go into this list and we look for Device Manager, we don't seem to see Device Manager anywhere. They are in alphabetical order in this view. No Device Manager. The other is Event Viewer, and indeed we do see that Event Viewer is listed there as well. That means that the one that we were looking for is the one that got 45% of the vote. Event Viewer was the one we were hoping to find. Hopefully that's given you some perspective on the different utilities available inside of administrative tools. If you go back and look at that list, you'll also notice that Indexing Options, Power Options, and Internet Options were also not in that list with administrative tools. It does seem unusual, indeed, some of the folks that are in the chat room talking about probably one of the 42% that chose Device Manager. It does seem unusual that Device Manager is not in the administrative tools, because we use that utility so much when we're troubleshooting. But the reality is, of course, that everybody's plugging in devices and other peripherals into their computer. And even if you're not an administrator, you do need to have access to be able to see the information associated with those devices. So I guess it does make sense that we would not specifically categorize it as an administrative tool, but instead have it as something that can be found elsewhere in the operating system. So hopefully that's given you some perspective to be able to do that. It is very useful to be able to know where these utilities are, and for your exam, you'll need to know when you would want to use those utilities. So it's more than just knowing where it is. We also have to know what that particular utility happens to do for us. So make sure you're familiar with those. If you're one of the 45% of you that chose Event Viewer, you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well done on that one. Well, as you've probably already seen, there is a large mix of different things you need to know for your A+. In fact, many people have said it is such a broad set of exams. You have to know a lot about these very different utilities, operating system functions, security, networking, cloud computing, hardware troubleshooting, software troubleshooting. It's all in these 2 exams. In fact, if you were to watch all of my videos that cover every single topic from the CompTIA exam objectives, it would amount to 137 videos. I remember every single one of them. And of course, that is about 19 hours of content. Now, I would love it if you were able to watch every single one of these videos. I would greatly appreciate it if you were able to go through and watch all 19 hours of content, but that's not always practical for everyone. That's why I've taken all of the information from every video and I've created a series of course notes. This is available in a printed form. You can see the perfect bound, printed, full color course notes available in my hand here, but we've also got a digital version of the course notes in PDF format. So it's a format that you can put on all of your devices. So no matter whether you're on your laptop, your desktop, your mobile device, you will always have these course notes available to reference. These are all indexed. You'll know exactly what page the different topics are on. And if you wanted to know something about, let's say, authentication methods, I can click that. It takes me directly to section 2.2, wireless encryption, authentication methods, malware, and you can go through all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the video, all of the content from the video, rather, that you will find that is important. So all of the important images, all of the important charts, they are in this set of course notes. You'll find these available for both the 220-1101 and the 220-1102 exam. And if you get both of them at the same time, you even get a little bit of a price break. If you'd like to see more about these, they're available on my website. It's also a great way to support what we do here. Visit professormesser.com/1102notes or simply follow the notes links at the top of the menus. We know we have more questions. We got a lot more questions to go, so we have plenty of time. Let's do another question that's on our list. This next question asks, which of the following prevents malware executing on a user account from infecting the core Windows operating system? Would that be EFS, SSO, NTFS, UAC, or ECC? Lots in there to be able to go through. Which of the following prevents malware executing on a user account from infecting the core Windows operating system? Is that EFS, SSO, NTFS, UAC, or ECC? And if you want to plug in your answer and lock it in, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Maybe you know this one. Maybe you've seen this one. Every single one of these, by the way, is a real set of utilities. These are not just letters that I crammed together on the screen. They are real things. Make sure you are familiar with them. If you think you know the answer, use that link, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We instead want to go through this entire list of real abbreviations and see if we happen to know which one it is. See if it's EFS, SSO, NTFS, UAC, ECC, EIEIO, I guess. That's where we're at with this one, is just figuring it out. Trying to know what it happens to be. Lock in your answer. Maybe some of you have done this one before. Maybe you know what it isn't, and you can take those off your list and do a little bit of calculatus elimitatus. Get rid of that, and then you've got a much better chance at getting the question right. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asked, which of the following prevents malware executing on a user account from infecting the core Windows operating system? Is this EFS, SSO, NTFS, UAC, or ECC? And we can see that 53% of you say the answer is UAC. And then we effectively have a four-way tie for second place. So from 13% said EFS, 12% said SSO, 10% said NTFS, and 10% say ECC. So this is really everyone who said UAC against everybody else. That's what we've turned into on this particular question. So is it really UAC, or is it one of these other technologies. Have we fooled ourselves into answering UAC? We have not. The answer is indeed UAC. It stands for User Account Control. This was one of those functions built into Windows that when it was first added, created quite the hubbub. People did not like having their Windows session interrupted. And to be fair, when this was introduced back in the Windows Vista days, UAC seemed to pop up for anything that happened on your system. It was almost a little overwhelming. Microsoft had to figure out what would be the best way to implement this in the operating system. And eventually they decided, all right, there's certain things that we want to be sure we recognize and pop up the UAC screen, and other things we don't. And they have given you the option within Windows to set what those thresholds might be, either on a very specific basis where you're never notified, or sometimes when you are always notified. So you get to set how secure you would like this to be, except you need to also understand that there's security based on this. So if you brought it down to the never notify, you're now setting yourself up for a great deal of risk on your system. So that's one of those where the administrator of your system has probably done this themselves. They've probably already set this as a policy where you can't change this on your system. You probably can change the one that's on your home computer, however. The UAC, when it pops up, brings up something called a secure desktop. The secure desktop is one where it prompts you to put in authentication, or it's reminding you that it's performing some type of extended function that goes beyond the normal access that your user account might have. It's a way to limit how much damage could be done by something like malware. So this is the type of thing that you would see on your screen. The background would go dark and it would say, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? And it puts up a lot of information about what's happening, what type of changes are being made, and it gives you the option for deciding whether this is something you were not expecting and you should tell the system, do not do this, or this may be something that you're installing a new browser, you're installing a new piece of software, and you understand, oh, this is normal part of the software installation process. That is UAC, the User Account Control, that provides that functionality. Now, we did have, as I mentioned, a four-way tie for second place. Let's step through each one of these. EFS, the encrypting file system, is a great technology for encrypting data that is on your system. Maybe there's a file or a folder that you would like to encrypt. EFS, the encrypting file system, can do that for you. You can look at the properties of the file and say, turn that into an encrypted file. It simply encrypts it. It's really that easy. To be able to use an EFS, you have to be using Windows. That's a Windows function. And you have to be using a file system known as the NT file system. This new technology file system that came out 30 years ago or so, I guess. Not so new in technology, although NTFS has been updated through the years. The NTFS we're using today is very different than the NTFS we were using back then. But we kept the name, which is probably a good idea. Then we don't have to remember additional things. It's just a newer version of NTFS. NTFS works in conjunction with EFS, so you have to be sure you're running the NT file system to be able to have the functionality of implementing EFS on that. Also, SSO, that stands for single sign-on. Single sign-on is great for putting in your username and password in the morning, and you never have to put in your username and password for the rest of the day, regardless of what systems you may connect to or resources that you might use. That SSO function has nothing to do with preventing malware from executing on a user account and keeping it away from the core Windows operating system, however. And then lastly, we have ECC. There's a couple of different abbreviations and explanations of what ECC could be. One that is very specific to memory and another specific to encryption or cryptography in general. ECC in this context on the A+, we could probably assume that that's associated with the memory technology that allows us to see and locate any problems with a parity error and be able to even correct those on your memory technologies. It's one that if you are running a server, especially a database server, a web server, or any larger system, you're probably running with ECC memory to be able to have that that extra safety there to be able to stop any problems with corruption within the memory itself. If you're running a normal Windows machine, a normal laptop that you're carrying around with you, probably not using ECC memory. So those are different options that are available in this case to be able to prevent malware from getting to that Windows operating system. UAC is what we were looking for, the user account control. Let's see, we got plenty of time. Let's do another question. We've got another one here for those of you that love malware and you love malware removal. Let's do a malware removal question. This one asks, an administrator has verified malware symptoms on a device and removed the computer from the network. Which of the following would be the next step in the malware removal process? Would that be schedule a scan, educate the end user, disable system restore, boot into safe mode, or update anti-malware signatures? An administrator has verified malware symptoms on a device and has removed the computer from the network. Which of the following would be the next step in the malware removal process? Is it schedule a scan, educate the end user, disable system restore, boot into safe mode, or update anti-malware signatures? If you think you know the answer, please use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints on the chat room. We want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. A lot of you putting in your answer quickly on this one. Now, although we did it very quickly on the last one too, and we were still a little bit torn to be able to know what that happens to be. Let's see how you do with this one. There's an entire section on section 3.3 of your exam, on the 1102 exam objectives, that discuss malware removal. It's just stuck in my brain. On the next version of the exam, I'm going to have to readjust to where the malware removal section is. Maybe they'll keep it exactly the same. My vote is keep it section 3.3. It makes it easier for me. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, an administrator has verified malware symptoms on a device and removed the computer from the network. Which of the following would be the next step in the malware removal process? Is it schedule a scan, educate the end user, disable system restore, boot into safe mode, or update anti-malware signatures? If we have a look at the responses, 39% of you, not quite a majority, say to disable system restore. 24% of you say boot into safe mode. 19% say schedule a scan. 13% say update anti-malware signatures. And only 3% say to educate the end user. Not many people into educating end users for some reason. So in this particular case, we're very early on in the malware removal process. Identifying malware is indeed that first step. Obviously, you have to have some type of evidence or inkling that something unusual is going on a system. Maybe they're getting a lot of pop-ups on the screen. Maybe there are errors that are starting up during the boot process, and those errors seem to indicate that malware could exist on a machine. That's your first clue to begin the rest of the process. The next step in that process is to remove the system from the network. You don't know if this is a worm. You don't know if there are ways that this malware can use to bounce between systems. We want to first isolate it and make sure it has no way to get that malware off of that computer and somehow get it onto someone else's computer. So we have a way now to create an air gap. That's the term we use in IT security to describe a system where we have no way to directly communicate to that box. So now we have this next step. We've already identified malware symptoms. We have removed the computer from the network. It is now quarantined. Now what do we do? Well, before we do anything on the system, we need to make sure that if we make changes to this system, that we're not going to end up reinfecting ourselves. And one of the places where information can be stored and later restored onto the system would be with backups. Obviously, we didn't really talk about backups as any of these options, but one of the things that does back up aspects of your operating system is system restore. For those of you familiar with System Restore, this is the one where it brings up a calendar and you can effectively go back in time and tell your system, please return the computer to this configuration, which can be very helpful if you make a configuration change and it causes a problem. You can tell your entire system, go back to last Friday because it was running great last Friday. Go back to that date, and that way I can have my old configuration back. Another benefit of that is it doesn't change your data. It only changes the operating system. So if you've been working on documents since last Friday, no problem. They will still be there when you roll back with System Restore. One of the problems, of course, is that System Restore might also contain part of the malware. Malware loves to go into System Restore and infect all of your restore points because people will often think, let me go back to last Friday when I didn't have malware. And they'll tell the system to revert back to last Friday, but the malware has already put the malware into the last Friday System Restore location. So that's why one of the best things we can do is to tell the system, delete everything in System Restore, nuke it. And one of the easiest ways to delete all of your System Restore is to simply disable it, click OK. And when you do that, it deletes all of those files. So it's a very, very easy way to be able to at least understand where you can prevent yourself from running into problems later. Because if you didn't like it, you would, if you ran into an issue where you didn't remove it, and then later on a user said, let me go back to last Friday. Now you've reinfected the system, and that's not what you would like to do. So disabling System Restore is the right answer. 39% of you chose that one, and that's what we were hoping to find in this case. The System Restore front end is very easy to use. You can simply tell it to turn on the protection of your system or disable it. That's where you would turn it on and off. So to remove the System Restore files, you simply click the Disable System Restore option and you click OK, and it deletes everything. So simple, and being able to do that. This is one you can also change from the startup menu inside of Windows, where you're hitting F2 during the beginning of the Windows boot process. So even if you can't get to this graphical front end, you still have a way to do that in the front end of the Windows startup process. Disabling System Restore is the one we were looking for. There are other options within the malware removal process. For example, you might want to update anti-malware signatures when you're ready to hand this back over to the user. And then once you update those anti-malware signatures, you might want to schedule a scan. And sometime in there, you may find that you're not able to remove the malware. It's not working the way you would expect. So sometimes you might want to boot into safe mode. And ultimately, usually the last thing you do is educating the end user. So that is another good example of something that's important to finish up with so the user knows how they got this malware and how they may prevent themselves from getting malware, at least in the future. So the one we were looking for here, the next step in this process is to disable System Restore. Obviously, later on in the process, we re-enable System Restore once we're ready to hand the system back over to the user. So that is what we were looking for in this case. We did get 39% of you that got that one right. I think it was a pretty good number, but it is one that we may want to work on a little bit with our malware removal process. And of course, I have an entire video on the malware removal process. You want to look at section 3.3. The video name is Removing Malware. That's the one you want to use to learn more about the malware removal process. We've got time for more questions, so let's do another one. I've got this one on a list. This one asks, a system administrator is viewing an MSDS for a newly installed server. Which of the following is the administrator referencing? Are they referencing maximum RAM capacity, handling and storage details, warranty information, end user license agreement, or end of life time frame? A system administrator is viewing an MSDS for a newly installed server. Which of the following is the administrator referencing? Is it maximum RAM capacity, handling and storage details, warranty information, end user license agreement, or end of life time frame? If you think you know the answer, visit the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. We'll have to see if you think you know what it is. So this is one where it can be very useful to know what these different options are. In fact, all of these things, of course, are things that are from the exam objectives. You need to know what all 5 of these things do, but you need to know how they are associated with an MSDS. So let's see how you do with locking in your answer on this one. See if you're familiar with these. These are, this is one where, like anything else with these exams, if you know the acronym, it could help you towards understanding the answer. But notice that on the exam, and even for the questions that I ask, you don't get trivia questions. You don't get, here's MSDS. What does that stand for? You will never see a question like that on a system. This is one where if you're ever in a situation where you need to know more about an abbreviation of some kind, like MSDS, just knowing what the letters stand for isn't enough. You need to understand what that is, when you would use it, how you would implement it, all of those things. So this is a pretty good thing to keep in mind. Let's see how you did with the MSDS. The question asks, a system administrator is viewing an MSDS for a newly installed server. Which of the following is the administrator referencing? Would it be maximum RAM capacity, handling and storage details, warranty information, end-user license agreement, or end-of-life time frame? And 73% of us, a strong number, say the answer is handling and storage details. We have end-user license agreement at 13%. And then there's effectively a 3-way tie for third place. Maximum RAM capacity at 4%, warranty information at 4%, and end-of-life time frame at effectively 4%, 3.68%. I'm glad we have that 0.68. It makes all the difference when you're working and trying to know how many people answered that question. 73% is a large number. Handling and storage details for MSDS. Well, it would be important to know what the MSDS is. That stands for a Material Safety Data Sheet. Sometimes you'll see this just abbreviated as an SDS, or a safety data sheet. So it gives you at least some options of what you might be using here. The MSDS has a great deal of information, and most of it is based around the safety and usability and storage and disposal of what can sometimes be very hazardous materials that we work with. Now, fortunately, a lot of the hazardous materials we work with are in a self-contained unit that we never have to touch or get near. But the MSDS is going to tell us, what do we do with that? For example, what if you have, like this MSDS, what if you have a toner cartridge? How do you dispose of the toner cartridge in a way that doesn't cause any type of damage to the environment, but is also a good way to dispose and get this out of your network or your closet? Well, now you've got the breakdown of what this is, what it contains, what the hazards are. If you get this on yourself, is there first aid that you need to know? And then how do you dispose of this? It's all in the MSDS. You may not even know this is in these documents that you use. Most of these are electronic these days anyway. So when you get in a new server or you're looking at buying a new piece of equipment, you may want to reference the MSDS on that particular device so you know more about what to expect with how to handle this. This can be especially important if you have like a group of UPS batteries. Now you've replaced, these UPS batteries have to be replaced every 3 years or so. And if you have 100 UPSs in your environment, you have 100 battery replacements. Well, now you've got 100 batteries left over. What do you do with these? Can you just throw them in the garbage? You cannot. You have to follow the instructions from your MSDS. And so that's why the handling and storage details would be included in a materials safety data sheet. And if you knew the MSDS abbreviation, you might have been able to figure that out from here. And MSDS does not tell us anything about the hardware configuration or maximum capacities of a system. So the maximum RAM capacity would not be found in your MSDS. Your end user license agreement, you would think that you have to answer that anytime you do anything. You know the end user license agreement. It's that thing you scroll all the way to the bottom and you click I agree without reading any of it. That is not part of the MSDS, although to use the server, you may have to scroll down through a number of those and click OK. It probably would be a good idea if you read one or two of those every once in a while. Next on our list, warranty information, also not included in the MSDS. Very unusual to find any warranty information there. You'd probably need to go to the main documentation of the device to find that, or the manufacturer's website. And then we have an end-of-life time frame. Again, that is something set by the manufacturer. It would not commonly be included in an MSDS. The only answer here that makes any sense is indeed the handling and storage details. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to give you a 1-hour webinar category CEU email that qualifies and says, you were here. I am certifying that indeed you watched 1 hour of this study group. The way that you would earn that CEU is you have to follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, click or put your name, your email address, and in the subject line, put the 2/20/11/02 February study group, maybe 2024 in there, something so that I know where this came from. It helps me in some format if I can see 2/20/11/02 A+ study group, February 2024 or something like that. It does not have to be exact. As long as I understand where it came from, we're fine. In the body of the message on a line by itself, I want you to put these code words that are specific to this particular event. The code words today are handling and storage details. Our super secret code words of the month are handling and storage details. So again, to be able to earn your CEU email, you want to go to the top or the bottom of the ProfessorMesser.com website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address, in the subject line, put February 2024 Core 2 or 2/20/11/02 or something like that. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, handling and storage details. And then if you'd like to put anything else into that message, you're more than welcome to. I do read through every single one of them. I do get hundreds of these, so I'm not able to respond back to every single one of them, but I do appreciate you putting them in there, and I do enjoy reading through those. Your answer here, again, was handling and storage details. So let's now, I realize we're sort of at the top of the hour, but I would like to give you one more question. Let's see if we can pull a question out from a different resource. I have a number of different resources I can pull from here. The one that I would like to show you, if I can bring it up on my screen, is the one that is available here. So this is, there's already been some questions about this on the study group already. Some folks were asking about my practice exams. One of the things I found as I was looking around the internet one day is that finding good practice questions for some reason is an incredible challenge. A lot of the websites I went to, the questions were not very specific to the exam. In fact, they were probably questions you would never see on the exam. In some cases, they talked about topics that weren't even in the exam objectives. Well, this doesn't make for very good questions. So I decided to write my own set of questions. Those questions I compiled into a set of practice exams. This is actually the one for the 1101. I've got to find the one around here for the 1102, but it looks like the picture that's on your screen here. It's about the same size, 380 pages. There are 3 90-question practice exams. Each set of practice exams has 5 performance-based questions, so there are 15 performance-based questions in this book. And let's do a question from the book. I have the PDF of the book right here. And of course, there are digital versions and physical versions. Our same rules apply, no answers in the chat room. And here's the question it asks. Question A45, the hard drive in a macOS desktop has failed. None of the data on the drive was recoverable. A new storage drive has now been installed. Which of the following should be used to restore the data on the computer? Is that backup and restore, mission control, time machine, or disk utility? Now, this is a PDF, so I have annotation features built into the PDF. If I wanted to highlight information or I think I know what the answer is, we can select things on the screen. If you have a tablet, you can use your pencil and you can draw on this because it is a PDF. It's open and available for you to make notes if you would like. In this case, I tell you that the answer, if you just want to know, is it A, B, C, or D, you can go to page 33. We are on page 17. You could, of course, scroll through this and then scroll back to where you were, but I put on here links that are built into this so that if I wanted to see the details, I could click the words, the details, and it would quickly slide me to page 81. So let's do that. Boom. I am now on page 81 of this. In fact, if we scroll the bottom and look, you can see that this is indeed page 81. So it does put the question back on the screen. The hard drive does this, it does that. So we can see exactly what the question was. And we can see that the answer is C, time machine. And here's an explanation of why that is the right answer. Now, that's great if you knew the answer was time machine. That gives you that qualification like, yep, I knew that one. I knew it was time machine, got that one right. But what if you didn't get the question right? What if you chose disk utility? Well, now there's no feedback to tell you why that was the wrong answer. So in my book, every single question not only tells you why the right answer was right, it also tells you why the wrong answer was wrong. This is your opportunity to finish up the learning process. It does no good to make a mistake and then not know how to resolve the mistake. Instead, we could choose disk utility and get immediate feedback that tells us disk utility is a macOS tool that allows the user to view, modify, and manage storage drives. Oh, that's right. That's the one you would use to set up and configure the drive, but it doesn't actually do the restoration of the data. You would need Time Machine to be able to back up and restore that data. Now, once you're done with this, it's a PDF, and you may not even realize this. Most PDF readers have a back button. I can simply click my back button at the top of the screen, and I'm back to where I started. And now I can go to the next question that is in my list. That is my practice exams book. You can find out more information about the practice exams on my website. Go to professormesser.com/core2pe or follow the menus either in the hamburger menu or the pull-down menus at the top of the website for the 220-1102. Maybe that's given you some other ideas for learning information. All of these questions that we got today came directly from topics included in the official CompTIA exam objectives. These objectives are available for you to download for free from the CompTIA website, and they will tell you everything you need to know to be able to pass this exam. Everything's in here. It is one of the first places you should go to begin your studies. It should be the last thing you use as a checklist. You can download these directly from the CompTIA website using a link on my site that you will find at professormesser.com/objectives, or you can simply go to your favorite search engine and look for CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to the page, and you'll be able to download the latest version of those objectives. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. This was an unusual month because we did our Core 1 study group yesterday. We do our Core 2 study group right now. This is it. For those of you not knowing where you were, we have Wednesday. We don't do a live stream this month. Then Thursday is our Network Plus live stream. Friday is our Security Plus live stream. I hope you would come back for those as well. But we, of course, do these every month. We have A+ study groups already scheduled in March for March 12th and March 14th. We have a Network Plus study group scheduled for March the 20th, and then Security Plus is scheduled for March 27th. These are also on my website calendar. The events calendar is at professormesser.com/calendar. And if you are in our Discord, then you will also find it in the events channel of our Discord. Sometimes these dates do change, as they did this month. So if those dates do make a change, you'll see them represented in the calendar or in the events channel. You will always know where that happens to be. Well, we are at the top of the hour, but we're not done yet. Now it's time for the after show, where I will take your questions and answer your questions that you have about technology, about certification, about career, or really anything else that you would like to talk about. Don't forget about my notes and practice exams. They're available on my website, as are the discounted vouchers. A very easy way to earn and get some money back on these vouchers. Instead of paying full price at the CompTIA website, you can get them for a discounted rate at professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you really enjoyed this, it would be great if you could give it a thumbs up. It costs you nothing, and it does mean a lot to us, especially when we're working with our friends over at YouTube. They like to also see that people are enjoying the content that we put out. You can, of course, find us on these social media sites as well, and we will be on Discord after we are done here at professormesser.com/Discord. Well, hopefully that's given you some perspective of things that you might want to think about learning. Stick around for the after show. We've got another hour of Q&A coming up. Thank you for being here on this study group, and we will see you next time on the Core 2 A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, I'm going to take a sip. Now let's shift gears for the after show. And let's see if we can see if we get some things going on our side. One of the things you may not know, I'll go ahead and close these results out. And you can see on your screen right now is a message that says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. And of course, this is in your link, professormesser.com/QA. So this is where you can go to fit some of these questions in, and then I will list or sift through the questions that you are submitting. And if you have different questions that you have about the exam, different questions about technology, or anything else, I will add them into this list, and we will have a look at what questions you might have. So this is really one, if you're going through this list, that a lot of these are about technology and about career and about the focus on those. So I like to give my perspective of that. You can find all of that at professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. So let's start with some of these. Some of these are more about, should I do this or should I do this? And the answer, interestingly enough, is the same every time. I'll explain this in a moment. This comes from JG, who asks, just passed my 1102, partly thanks to your vids. Thoughts on going for CCNA? So I'm assuming in this particular case, JG, that you have completed your A+, you've now earned your A+ certification, and now you're trying to figure out what's the next step. Should I get my CCNA? And the answer is maybe. The answer might also be maybe not. And it's because I don't know some things about you, and I don't know some things about the different organizations and companies in your area. And whenever you're trying to determine what direction do you take in your career, especially with certifications, it would be useful if your interests match the requirements of a hiring manager. And the reason I say that is because if they match, you have a better chance to be hired. This is probably what most people are shooting for. You could, of course, just take whatever you would like. There is some benefit to learning things that are interesting to you, but it would be nice if the things interesting to you were also interesting to a hiring manager. And that's where I tell everyone to start. Maybe CCNA would be a great choice for you, but I don't know what employers in your area are asking for. You may go through a list of all the employers, and you may find that 99% of them are asking for Network Plus. You may find that if you live in the DC area, about 99% of them are asking for Security Plus. So in that particular case, CCNA may not be the best choice to go with. But you don't know until you start looking at the different options out there. Every certification has its own advantages and disadvantages. This applies to A+ and Network Plus, Security Plus, the CCNA, the Red Hat, the Microsoft, the Palo Alto Networks. All of them have places where they fit best and other places where they do not. So I always tell people, if you're interested in a particular certification, well, that's definitely a check mark in its favor, but do other hiring managers have the same interest? And you may want to change your strategy based on the current climate in your particular area. Not climate in is it raining outside, but the hiring climate, and understand what hiring managers might want from you. So that is the part that I think would be super useful, is knowing where you live, what employers are looking for. But this means you need to do a little work. It doesn't take a lot of work. It might take an hour or so. Build a spreadsheet, get a list of every job in your area that you think you might qualify for, and make that list one where you can really break down, here's what people are asking for. Here are the different certifications they mentioned. Here are different skill sets they would like us to have. And now you effectively have a checklist of, here's what hiring managers would like from me. Now, one of the benefits there is, even after you get that job, maybe you find that everybody is asking for Security Plus. You go out and you get your Security Plus, you get the job. Now, there's going to be an opportunity to learn even more. That's one of the things in this industry that we do so well, is it never stops. Whenever you think you finally know some technology, the whole world evolves, and now you have to learn new technologies or pivot into a different set of technologies. And with IT, you could start with Windows. You could then maybe go to Linux. Maybe you want to learn more about the networking side of things. Maybe you'd like to design networks. Maybe you'd like to get into cloud technologies. Maybe it would be more interesting to do something associated with databases. Maybe you'd like to do security. You have the choice of where you go in this industry, and you can kind of lean into one of those different areas and maybe find jobs where people would like others to have those skill sets. So I think that is one where, especially if you go into the world of IT, you will always be working towards some particular goal, or at least you should be. And it may be that CCNA is the right next step for you. Might also be that a different certification is the right next step for you. You have to be able to make those decisions. I unfortunately don't have any feedback or can't give any feedback, because I don't know what your career goals are. I don't know what people in your area are looking for, but you do. So that's my task. I've now given you homework. You now have to go off and create that spreadsheet and figure out the details, and then you can answer the question, CCNA a good idea or not, and go with that view of the world. Let's do some more questions. I've got more in here. I think we've got others that we can pull from if we start looking through the details. Let's see what other things might be here. There are a number of good ones that we have. As a quick answer, someone in the chat room, and I can see you probably submitted a question here, is when is the Security Plus study group this month? Well, you're in luck because it's this week. We're doing 4 live streams this week. This is our second of the 4. Thursday is Network Plus. Friday is Security Plus. Just that easy. And of course, if you ever want to know when the next live streams are, they are always in the calendar. You go to professormesser.com/calendar. Let's see other questions that you might have in this list. So let's see if we can, along those same lines, talk to this one. This is a popular question that comes up from time to time. This is from Frederick, who says, how do you make the jump from, in Frederick's case, facilities to cybersecurity without taking a big pay cut? So this is a pretty good question, because it sort of applies not just to facilities. How do you make the jump from retail to IT? How do you make the jump from a job in food services to IT, nursing to IT, transportation to IT, manufacturing? You get the idea. This is a common question because there are people that have been spending their time with their career working in a particular segment, and now they would like to move from that market into information technology. Now, when you start doing that and you make that career change, sort of an abrupt move in the middle of your career, that's one that does take a little bit of thought and a little bit of a strategy, and it works a little bit differently than it did when you started your career. Let's maybe get into this. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but let's quickly revisit and we'll talk into more specifics. The first thing is we need to have a reasonable place that we're jumping into. In this particular case, Frederick mentioned moving from one type of vertical market, in this case, facilities or management or management of a place or building. And then you are moving from that management role into cybersecurity. Well, one of the challenges of this is that there are not a lot of entry-level cybersecurity jobs in IT relative to all of the other entry-level jobs in IT. So if we look at every entry-level job available in IT, cybersecurity is a very small percentage of those. It might even be single percentage. It's very difficult to find entry-level IT jobs. Doesn't mean they aren't out there. They obviously exist. But if we start looking at everything that we could choose from, you might want to go with a higher percentage success rate by going to something that may not necessarily be cybersecurity from the very beginning. Now, that might not be the case where you live. You might be in a very big area. It may be a large number of people in your metropolitan area, and there might be many companies that have a security operations center or a SOC. The Security Operations Center often will hire people to triage. They'll answer the phone and figure out who needs to get this particular ticket. Well, that's an entry-level position, sort of like a help desk, but very specific to security. Those jobs exist, and I know a lot of people that have started their career with those types of jobs. But there are so many other jobs available in the whole of IT that would be good starting points. And so I would recommend that you expand your scope to be any possible entry-level job in IT. One of the things people sometimes, I think, don't realize is that in IT, you're never pigeonholed. You're never stuck into one particular cylinder or silo of knowledge. Instead, you might start with help desk with an emphasis in understanding the Windows operating system. But then you might think, I'd love to be a Linux administrator. Well, it's very easy to take the skills that you've now learned on the Windows side and pivot those over to doing something on the Linux side. Just as it might be after learning Windows and Linux, you might want to learn more about the network. Well, you've already done all of the network configurations in Linux. You might have set up some link aggregation to a server. You've already done a bit of that, so it might be easy then to pivot into network administration. And then from there, finally, you have this foundation of operating systems, networking, and you can start layering some security on top of that. Now, that might be a 5-year journey. This is not something that happens overnight, but it is one where you can accumulate a large amount of knowledge and be able to expand and use that knowledge to effectively level up in your career. So you started at help desk, you level up to Windows administrator, you level up to Linux administration, maybe you level up to the cloud or to networking, and from there go to security. So there might be a pathway there that is a bit more reasonable than simply wondering, can I start with cybersecurity? Well, you might be able to, but it may not be the highest percentage of a success for finding that job. Now let's talk about what do you do as somebody who's changing careers, because that has its own set of challenges. When you start getting into career change, one of the things, and Frederick even mentioned this, is big pay cut. Now, this is one of the realities of working in IT and sort of starting at the bottom, changing careers to IT and starting at the bottom, is that it often means that you're now going to make less money. You've spent 5 to 10 years building up a career in another area. Now you sort of have to start at the bottom and work your way up. But there are things you can do to speed that process up to increase the amount of money you make in a shorter period of time. One is that, I would like to believe this, is that if you've been working for 5 or 10 years, I would like to believe that we are a bit more mature and understanding of the requirements of having that day-to-day job. Let's just say perhaps more mature than you have been in your early days. I don't think we're talking out of line for most of us anyway. Some of us, some people that I know were very good at the straight and narrow when they were younger and they got to work on time, they left on time, and it was perfect. But not everyone has that. You sort of had to learn the process. But now you've made some connections in the industry that you work in. You're very comfortable with the process of coming to work and being available to do your job. Now we need to take that same maturity and bring it into a different role. So really now we're really concentrating on technology. If we can just learn the technology quickly, we can then move up quickly in this industry, which, by the way, can happen very, very fast if you apply yourself. So this is one where there's often a cut in pay. One of the things I will recommend for anybody moving from one career to another is that whatever career you're currently in, whatever vertical market that happens to be, there is an IT component. So if you work in retail, there's an IT department for your retail company. If you work in food distribution, there's an IT component for the food distribution. If you work in medicine, there's obviously a significant IT component for that entire hospital or that medical practice. So one of the things I tell people all the time, if you want to leverage your skills and perhaps even bring something to the table that other technical people don't have, is get a job in your same industry, but get that job with the IT department. And I will tell you that IT departments struggle with this constantly, is that you have a lot of people in IT who know a lot about Windows, but they don't necessarily know anything about healthcare, but they're working in a hospital help desk or they're working in a hospital IT department. And so there's a constant battle, and this is across every IT department that I've ever spoken with everywhere, and I've spoken with hundreds or maybe thousands of different IT departments, is that you have to be able, from an IT perspective, to understand what the business or the organization is trying to accomplish. Being able to patch your operating systems every week as quickly as possible is important. But unless you understand why that's important to the organization, it's a relatively pointless exercise. So one of the things that's great if you work in medicine and then you get a job working in the IT department of a hospital, you're bringing to the table knowledge that nobody else in IT has. In fact, it's very valuable knowledge. So that's why I would highly recommend that you find a job in your same vertical market, or maybe something that's nearby, something that's close to the vertical market. It might help. That doesn't always happen. It's not always an opportunity that's available to everyone, but it can certainly help. The other thing that I will tell you, and I mentioned this one yesterday, and I think it's worth mentioning, is we talk about the big pay cut and we're worried about the pay, but the upward mobility in IT is extensive and available, and it's certainly more accessible than perhaps other markets, other types of jobs that you might do. So I will say that one of the advantages you have of already working in an industry for 5 to 10 years is that you've created contacts. You know people. You have been part of organizations outside of work. Maybe you have church that you go to. Maybe there are a different organization that you're a member of. Maybe you know people who are your neighbors who work in some of these larger organizations. Reach out to those people. Talk to the people at church. Talk to the people in your organizations that you work with. Talk to your neighbors and find out, hey, do you know anybody in the IT department where you work? Are they hiring right now? Is there someone I can speak to? Can I give you my resume? You should be your own proponent, getting that into the hands of as many people as possible. Because one of the things that is a very powerful truth when it comes to hiring is hiring managers like hiring people they can trust or that they know. You don't want to make and I'm speaking as a former hiring manager, I guess technically I still am. But whenever you're hiring, you don't want to make a decision to hire somebody who turns out to be a little bit flaky. Maybe they were misrepresenting their knowledge, and now you've got them in the organization, and it's much harder to get them out of the organization than it is to get them in. So you want to be sure the decision you're making is a good one. And if somebody in your company knows that person and they can vouch for them, that makes the process so much better for the hiring manager. It takes away a lot of those concerns. So we like hiring people we know, or we like hiring people who know someone else who works in our organization. So use those connections. It's often said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, it's not entirely true. A good part of it is what you know, but who you know is at least as important as what you know. And those types of connections can be really, really helpful during the job hunt. Ask everyone you know. Do you know anybody in IT? Do you know if they're hiring? Do you have a cousin? Do you have a friend? Do you have a neighbor? Can I talk to them? You should be all over this. You should be talking to them constantly. So yes, you should be concerned about pay cuts. You should be concerned about the process. You should be concerned about all of that, but there are ways to address it. And I will say, more than medicine, more than law, more than food service, more than transportation, once you get into IT, the sky's the limit. There really is no top line here. If you want to keep moving up and becoming even more knowledgeable and make more money and more flexibility, the opportunities are there within IT. You just have to find the time, the effort, and the reason for learning all of that content and moving forward. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you have sent. You've sent so many questions here, and I want to be sure to get to as many as we can. A lot of these, if you would like to also submit your own question, you can follow the link on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit that question. I need to change the lower third a bit so it actually explains in the second hour what that's doing for you. That's something else that's happening there. There are questions on here. We might as well address this one because what happened, what is going on? As Carson begins, Carson has really hit the nail on the head. What is going on? Are you working from a new studio? I'm comfortable with change. I need to know if the Rubik's Cube is safe. So a lot of you remember the other studio, the one that had there was other things here. There was a whole green screen full of stuff. You remember it. There was an electronic Rubik's Cube. There was a fireplace. There were other things there. They're not there. Where did they go? They're missing. We just plopped in another green screen. It's a different green screen image, I guess. That's actually a real wall. That's, for those of you that have watched this for a while, the whole green screen thing is a bit of an inside joke because there never has been one. I like actual physical sets. I like there to be a thing at my set. So yeah, it's a little bit different, isn't it? We changed some things around, got a little bit different. There's no more fireplace, but the Rubik's Cube is safe. So do not worry. We have made sure that the Rubik's Cube is in a good place. It's packed away at the moment, but it is somewhere. You can see there's nowhere to put it here. I don't have anywhere I can fit it in, but it is there and it is available. So do not worry. But it is different. And you probably noticed there's a little bit different audio than it has been. It's very much the same. All the chain is exactly the same. All the equipment is the same. Everything we're doing here is the same. So there's no difference in the layout. I'm using exactly the same equipment. Some of the audio chain I updated and made a little bit better, but there's things in this room that still need to be fixed. I've got audio. There's a little slight echo in the room that I'm not sure comes across really well on the mic or not. It might not. But there are things that do need to be updated. So we'll be tweaking things over time. I still need to work on more white balance. I need to do a full color calibration of this camera. It's a big list. What can it's just constant motion, on here. So yeah, it is a little bit different, isn't it? And I think it's a nice change. I think it's a nice update. The room is much better for what we're doing here. But everything's great here. I love the new set that we've got. I love the new layout that we have. I've greatly simplified the configuration. Although it looks very much the same on the top of the desk, it's very different underneath. We have two 18-inch racks that are underneath the desk, that are sound protected, sound suppressed. So I have things that are running in here, making noise right now. But now it's a much simpler layout than it was, and I got rid of a lot of things that were on my desk. The computer that we had back here is gone. It's now underneath. The audio system underneath. It's so nice. But we were working on it. We're getting there. There's always something going on. One of the things that any boat owner will tell you is that you just constantly make changes. It's the same thing for someone who has a YouTube studio. They're constantly updating and making changes to this, and I'm doing the same thing. I already have in my mind 3 or 4 things that I want to change right now that are above and beyond what we've already done. So So that's, people are asking, how many screens is that? Well, let's count, shall we? So we've got the screen on the left side is the streaming system. So this is the streamer. This is the console of the streaming system. It shows you what's being sent out right now. So it's sort of a picture and a picture and a picture and a picture if you were to look very carefully at that. But it tells me how things are running, and I could see at an instant how things are operating, both from the audio perspective and the video stream that's going out. That's its own system. Then again, a separate self-contained system are these boxes of videos that you can see on the screen there. That is the video switching system. The console for that is this console that's right in front of me with the red and green lights on it. And when I need to change to different buttons or different screens, I press a button and we have that video switching here. It's all on the hardware. It's a 4K switcher, and it's the same one I use to do all of my courses. In front of me and to the right is the two screens for the Mac Studio that I have. So that is effectively my main desktop, are these two monitors. It's this monitor and this monitor are the two monitors we're working from. And then, so that's what, 4 monitors. Also have an iPad here that tells me what the current slide is and what the next slide is going to be. I guess that's another screen, right? And then 1 laptop. So we got a laptop here that's running the keynote presentation. That is being controlled from the iPad. There's just too much here. But there's things I want to update with this. For example, there are some great improvements with some of, many people will use it as a reader so that you can put it in front of the camera and you can read the script as it's going by. I don't have scripts, so that wouldn't help me. But I was thinking of having it there because you can see the monitor, you can see the screen. So instead of me looking over here, where if you've noticed, whenever I'm reading some things, I'm reading from this screen, I'm not looking at you. If I'm looking at my laptop, I have to turn all the way here. If I look at my iPad, I'm here. I was thinking of putting it right in the camera, and then I could see what you are seeing and talk to it without having to do that. So there's all kinds of things we can work on. We're gonna work through that and add a bunch of stuff and make it, because it's really just more interesting for me if I just keep changing things. Make it a little bit more fun whenever we work through it. Let's do some more. We've got more questions on here and we have more time, so we can answer some of these and work through these. This is a question Ren, I was literally just reading this question on here, and I was clicking the publish and you put it into the chat, which tells me that that was meant to be, right? So let's look at the question you brought up, which is building a home lab something you would recommend? If so, how do you effectively market that on your resume? It is so easy to market. So we'll come back to that. The marketing part just works for itself. Let's talk about how we would set up a home lab. I talk about this in my video. It's in the YouTube video description of this video, where I talk about how you would get a job in IT with no experience. And so it's literally a 30-minute video chock full of data. You know, in my videos, there's not a lot of fluff. It's all boom, 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 topic, 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 bullet, bullet, bullet. I hit you with everything, and there's no chance to take a breath because I just assume you can hit the pause button. If it's going a little crazy, you can slow me down, you can speed it up. You have the option for that. But one of the things I talk about in that video, how to get a job in IT with no experience, is that there are things you can do to help yourself during this journey. And one of those things is a home lab. And it's not just for your own personal understanding or knowledge on how to use this technology. It's also for storytelling. And I think a lot of people don't realize that an interview is not a Q&A session. An interview is a chance for you to tell stories. And the more stories you have and the more interesting those stories are, the better chance you're going to get a job. So let me back up, and we'll start with the home lab, and then I'll tell you how to turn those into stories. So let's start with something relatively straightforward. I put a few examples into that video, but let's look at some examples of a home lab that you could start up right now. Most home labs, I think, will probably be running in a virtual machine. So if you're using VirtualBox, if you're using VMware's virtual systems on your desktop, if you're running Mac OS, especially with the newer technologies, you may be using others. I use Parallels Desktop on my Mac OS system. It runs amazing, great integration into the Mac OS operating system. But there are other, VMware makes some VM software for Mac OS as well. There are a lot of options out there. Find one you like and then start loading up some virtual machines. Install a Linux virtual machine, install a Windows virtual machine, install a lot of different virtual machines, and just see how the process works. See how you start them up and get them going. Then once you become more accustomed with the VM process, you can start putting them to work. And a really good example of a good home lab to set up, especially if you're trying to get that first job in IT, is to load Windows Server and install and run Active Directory. Now, there's lots of videos on YouTube you can go that steps you through this process. So I have not made my own video along those lines, but it's a relatively straightforward process. And there's plenty of things that you have to do during the setup to have it work properly. And I will tell you, for most of us that set up Active Directory, you load up Windows Server and you load up Active Directory, and then you start a separate Windows VM, and you try to get that separate Windows VM to talk or communicate or connect with Active Directory, you'll run into a problem almost every time, because there's a few things you have to make sure are configured properly for those to talk properly with each other. And not everybody gets those the first time. In fact, very few people set up everything exactly correct the first time, but that's okay. That's why you do a home lab. That's the whole point. In fact, every time you're working in your home lab, regardless of what you're setting up, and something isn't working, you should stop and document it. Either do screenshots. You should have a separate folder where you're storing these, because these are your stories. You may be thinking to yourself, wait, it's broken. How is that a story? Well, we're not at the part where the end of the story is. We're only in the first act. The first act is we have a problem. What we can't connect to Active Directory. It's not working from this Windows machine. Act 2 is what's going on. How can I collect some data? How can I figure out what's really happening here? And how can I get some ideas on how to solve this issue? So that's where we do some YouTube searching. We do searching in different forums. We ask Google. We go ask friends who've set it up before. We do a lot of different things to figure out where this problem may be happening. And then we try testing those things that we have found. We try testing, oh, well, I found an article that said it could be related to this. Let's try that. Well, that didn't work. All right, well, I found another article that said it might be related to DNS, because it always is related to DNS. Let's try that. Oh, wait, that fixed it. That particular change resolved the communication problem that I had from this machine to this machine. Again, document, document, document. But now we've got your Act 1, your Act 2, and finally your Act 3. And now when somebody says in an interview, tell me about a time when you've run into a technical problem that had you stumped, and how did you resolve it? This is a common interview question. You probably heard it over and over again. They talk about it on YouTube videos. You've probably been in an interview where somebody said something like this. And now you have a story. Now you have this, it's in your back pocket. You're just ready to pull out the story and tell them about it. And when they ask the question, they go, oh, I just had this happen last month when I was setting up a home lab. Here's what happened. And you can talk about it. I installed Windows Server. It went great. I installed my VM for this Windows device. It went great. Everything is working exactly the way you expect. I tried to get this machine to talk to Active Directory, and it didn't work. And here's the error that I got. And I started this process of trying to figure out, these two operating systems are working fine. Why are they not talking to each other? And you can talk them through. I went to this website. I talked to these people on this website. I went to this Discord. I went to this website. I gathered information from YouTube. I did all of these things. And then I ran into this article that talked about the fix. And this is what they had me do. And here's why that fix worked. And you could talk, this is a 5 to 10 minute dissertation that you're giving. It's a whole story that you have about the installation, the problem, and the resolution. And that is the same process you use for every single story, every single problem you run into. That's what I would recommend. Whether you're installing a UTM or some other type of firewall and you're running into problems getting it running, there's a story there. You're loading up an application. Maybe you're loading up WordPress and you want to run your own content management system. It's not going to work out of the box, or you're going to run into some type of problem with permissions or storage space or redirections. WordPress is awful with everything has to be exactly right. Well, there's a whole set of stories there that probably revolves around Apache web server. You probably have a MySQL configuration, and there's probably a Perl component. Those are always the things you run into with those web-based applications and being able to make sure that they install properly. So plenty of places where you get to have a story. So that's what I would recommend you do. The Home Lab is absolutely something that I would recommend. And it's not even necessarily about the marketing on your resume, although it is, because now you can put on your resume knowledge of Microsoft Active Directory, knowledge of that particular firewall you installed, knowledge of WordPress installations. Those are the things you put on your resume, but perhaps more importantly is your opportunity to tell the story in the interview. I know that a lot of interviews these days are face-to-face. We're doing those. There is an increasing number, and I haven't seen this really leak into the IT group as much, but there is a trend in interviewing these days where you're effectively just recording a video. They give you a topic and they ask you to discuss that topic on video to the camera. You're not even talking to a person, which I find more than a little insulting. I understand why they're doing it. I just don't think they should be. So I guess there's the conflict. I think that if you're in that position, though, where someone is talking to you about recording one of these videos, or they ask you one of those leading questions, usually it's over a Zoom or some other type of video conferencing, now you get to tell your story. Like I'm so glad I have the chance to record this and tell you the story of what I ran into last week when I was setting up my home lab. And now you just give the story. In fact, you may even want to just do that one day tonight to your camera, tell the story. See if you know all of the different pieces, because once you tell it a couple of times, now it becomes an easier story. Maybe you fit a joke in there. Maybe you have something that talks about it where everybody can go, oh yeah, we've run into that. You can have that head shaking. That's what you're looking for on the other side is everyone is understanding the story and the experience that you're explaining and trying to get that there. So that's what I think you should do is really work on understanding home lab, the value of the home lab, of understanding not just the technology, but also the value this can bring to your storytelling during an interview. So those are ways to make that happen. And I've already just by mentioning those awful one-way interviews, people in the chat room are up in arms about it. So my goal was not to make you crazy. My goal was to tell you that it's a reality and you may have to think about that. I've done a lot of, I don't want to say it this way, I've done things in my career that I had to do because it was part of the job. But I didn't necessarily agree with the way the process was done. Ultimately, we got to the same endpoint. If we had done it my way, we would have gotten there. If we did it their way, we would have gotten there. I just didn't like their way of doing it, which I guess is why I have my own company now. Maybe that's what drives me. It's just bad managers. Once you get those, it really drives you. I had great managers, though. I had mostly great managers, though. I had some managers that were phenomenal, that to this day, I would go the ends of the earth for, that I would fight next to. And other managers that I don't really care what they're doing these days. You know who you were. That's right. Let's get other questions in here. I think we all go through that from time to time. One of the nice things about IT is you have the flexibility on where you would like to work and who you would like to work for. So good. to have the option. Let's do some more. This is a lot of good stuff and working through these. I'm going to move some of these out of the way. Some folks did submit some here. I know somebody else said, I have 2 questions. That's all it said. So if you do still have 2 questions, feel free to submit those. I didn't get them in the question you submitted. I just got a statement that said you had 2 questions. Although that may be the only thing you were really trying to say at the time. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Other questions we have, though, we have some time before the top of the hour. So let's keep going and working through these. Here's one. This is more, I don't have a specific answer for you, but I sort of do. So this is from Joel, who asks, hey, what do the performance-based questions actually look like on the 1102 exam? I'm sorry, Joel. You probably sound nothing like this. What do those performance-based questions actually look like on the 1102 exam? What do they look like? Well, one of the things that is sort of a universal truth when it comes to exams is you don't know what they look like. You will not know what they look like until you take the exam. That's one of the things about it. But here's some things that are always going to be true. The first is that the performance-based questions are asking you about information that is contained in the official CompTIA exam objectives. So already, now I've only mentioned these objectives 172 times in this 2-hour period, but by now you know what the objectives are. So the performance-based questions are simply asking you the same information, but in a different way. That's it. The only difference is it's just not a multiple choice-based question. It might be a matching question. It might be putting things in a particular order. It might be one where you are dragging and dropping things on the screen. It may be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. These are things that are all in your exam objectives. And so just because they're not saying, is it A, B, C, or D, doesn't make it any more difficult. In fact, in some cases, I've had people come back after their exam and they said, I got really worried about the performance-based questions, but they were very straightforward and I knew exactly what to do. And I think I got them right. Okay. So a lot of the worry that people have about performance-based questions, the concerns they have about the questions being difficult or from an unusual set of topics, you don't have to worry about that. CompTIA has done, I think, a very good job at making them relatively succinct. They are very straightforward. They tell you exactly what you need to do. And in many cases, it's content. In fact, some of the content we went through today could easily show up in a performance-based question. And I don't think anything we went through today was so crazy and difficult. I think that it was a relatively straightforward explanation of the things you would find on the exam objectives. And I think the performance-based questions would be very, very similar. So that's where I think from your perspective of worrying about what did they really look like, don't worry about it. It's literally nothing you have to worry about. I know that is a bit flippant coming from someone who's not taking the exam. You're the one taking the exam, but I can tell you from the feedback that we are getting from others and from the things that we have seen ourselves, it is nothing that you have to worry about, spend a lot of time. And ultimately, I don't want to say this too loudly, it could possibly not matter to you. And I don't mean that it doesn't matter. The performance-based questions are very important. You need to, of course, get as many of these questions right in your exam as possible. But there are people that have come to us after the exam that said, I skipped over the performance-based questions because it's something you can do on the CompTIA exams. I skipped over them. I spent all of my time on the multiple choice questions. And then when I came back to restart and do the performance-based questions, I ran out of time. I literally did not answer anything on the performance-based questions, and I passed. So they must have done really well on the multiple choice-based questions, but it brings up what I think is a bit of a misnomer. Is I think people feel that the performance-based questions have a great deal of weight on the exam. Now, to be fair, we don't know how much weight they have on the exam because we don't know how CompTIA scores anything. I'm as in the blind about that as you are. I have no idea how they score these exams, and they're not going to tell us how they score this exam. But I find it interesting that, and I do believe the person that was talking to me was being truthful in what they were saying. I do believe they did the entire exam. They didn't answer any performance-based questions, and yet they still passed. And I think that leads us, although we can't be very definitive about how many points come from the performance-based questions, it's not a do or die situation. It's not an all or nothing situation. So don't worry about the performance-based questions. That's my takeaway there. Don't worry about the scoring of them. Don't worry about how many of them there are. Don't worry, did you get them right or get them wrong? Just do the best you can at the entire exam. Do very good with your time management. Make sure you can answer as many questions as possible. And sometimes, even if you don't answer performance-based questions, you might still come out with a passing score. So ultimately, kind of think them as something that is more gravy on the top. You've got now a topping of multiple choice-based questions. Now we're just going to get even more points with the performance-based questions. We'll just add them into our list and make that happen. I think some people get into the performance-based questions. They move right through them. Boom, boom, boom. They're done, and they're off to the next thing. Not even realizing they just went through all of them, and they probably got a pretty good score on them too. So it's not as hard as I think people think that it is. I just want people to understand that it's a worry you shouldn't have. There's lots of things to worry about on this exam. Performance-based questions is not one of them. Spend your time on the topics, spend your time on the exam objectives, and everything else will work its way out. That's the real key. Let's do some more. I've got other questions that are in here. I think we can fit another one into this list and see what's here. We've got other questions people are asking. This is more of a question about what we're doing here with study groups, but I think that's worthwhile to talk about. This is from Anonymous, who says, I'm studying for my Security Plus 601. Do you plan on doing any study sessions for 601 or only 701 from now on? Now, for those of you that have not been following Security Plus, the 601 exam has been out for over 3 years now. It retires on July 31st of this year. So as we sit here in February, the end of February, you've got March, April, May, June, July, 5 months before that exam goes away. And at the end of July, that is the retirement date. After July, you will not be able to take the 601 exam. The only exam that will be available at that point is the 701 exam, which, by the way, is already available. The 701 exam was released in November. So it's an exam that's only been out for 2 or 3 months now, and it will still be around for another 3 years. So you've got this, you're in this interesting transition period between the 601 and 701 where you could take either one of those and earn your Security Plus certification. You only have to take one. The idea is that you may have been already studying for 6 months for the 601. This gives you a chance to finish up your studies. If you're starting right now, I would really recommend you look at the 701 because I think that is a better exam going forward. You don't have to worry about hitting up on that 5-month retirement date. There's no deadline to get this done. So 701 may be a better choice. The question, though, is specific to the study groups that we do. Because we have been doing 601 study groups for 3 years, you have 3 years of content that you can go back and watch. We transitioned into doing the 701 study groups last month. Last month was our very first 701 study group, and going forward, they will all be 701 study groups. So that's very common for us to do in these transition periods, is to ourselves transition off of the old one and transition into the new one. And that's what we've done with the 701. So to directly answer your question, we do not plan on doing additional study sessions for the 601. We only plan on doing sessions for the 701 from now on. So that should give you an idea of where you can focus your efforts. If you're still working on the 601, go back and do the 601 pieces We've got all the videos of every study group is all archived on YouTube. There's a playlist for every single one of them, and you can run through them all. In fact, I should just bring up, I should go to professormesser.com/YouTube, which takes you to my YouTube channel. And in my playlists, there are playlists here for all of my study groups. Here's the 701 study group that's got 2 videos in it. I guess we did January, and technically, I guess the one for February will be in there. We've got other study groups, but you have the 601 study group as part of these as well. Here's the 601 study group playlist. Let's view the playlist just so we can see. So this goes from, it ends in December of 2023, which you can't see there because my head's in the way. There we go. It ends in December of 2023, but if we scroll through here, there's 35 videos here. All 2-hour study groups going back to January of 2021. So you've got quite a few videos to go through for your 601 studies. It's one of those cases where we had to, at some point, make that transition. We had to move back and choose the right one for what we were doing. And 701 is what we decided in January we would just shift over to the 701. Is the 701 more difficult than the 601? I would probably... from a difficulty level, the type of questions that are asked are very comparable between the 701 or 601, but the 701 exam objectives are much smaller. So there's fewer things to know. There's fewer things to memorize. From that perspective, the 701 may be a little bit easier because you don't have so much that you have to study. It's a smaller amount of content than the 601 happens to be. Another advantage, I guess, of someone who's trying to work through the details of this. We got time for one more question, so let's get another one into this mix. There's so many good questions here. I'm sorry I'm not able to get to every single one of these. But I think there are others we can focus on to work from all of this. Let's find these. I think we've got others that we can go to. We've got a lot of people that have sent messages in about the studio. We will have to do a studio tour in the future. I think there's some things here. Now that I've gone through and restructured some of the audio chain and other things here, I think it'd be worth looking at. And we can talk about what's there and what people are doing with it. This is more of a generic one. In fact, we had 2 questions about this come through at the same time. In fact, I might as well put both of them up so that we can see all of them. In fact, this is 2 of many that are in this list. One of these is from Derek, who asks, do you ever plan to do Pen Test Plus or Linux Plus certification series? Mike C asks, any plans to expand other than Trifecta, CCNA, CISSP? Thanks for the content. Thanks for the question, Mike. Both of those are good questions, and both of those are worth asking, I think. These are questions that, interestingly enough, I ask myself constantly. So this is an ongoing challenge for somebody who creates content like I do, is what do you do next? What is the best choice for what we are doing? And I have my own algorithm, my own formula that I use to determine, is something worth doing? Is it something worthwhile? And it has a lot of different variables in it. It's not any one or 2 things. It's about, is the content something that's difficult to find elsewhere? Is the content something that a lot of people could find value in? Would that training course be something that would have longevity? Would that training course be information that I feel that I would be a good person to provide to you? Because although IT, I've been in IT and doing many different things in IT over a long period of time, nobody in IT has done everything. So there are some topics that probably I would not want to do. Other topics I would love to do. I think I've even mentioned before, a CCNA course would be just fantastic. It would be so much fun because that's something I've done in my career. I've been that network administrator. I've built networks. I've designed networks. I've implemented the networks. And so that's another one that would be a lot of fun to do. But even others like Pen Test Plus, Linux Plus. I'm my own Linux administrator. Linux Plus seems to fit into that. Pen Test Plus certainly fits the cybersecurity background that I've had. So there's other places. There's plenty to choose from, and I have quite a list. For those of you wondering, I always have quite a list of things that I I could possibly do. It's a list that's constantly changing. And it also depends on how much time is available, because it doesn't take a day to create a course. It even doesn't take a week. It takes many, many months to create these courses. So when you commit to one of these, there is a big commitment, and you really want to be sure that what you are doing is the right thing. Sometimes I really don't know what the next one is going to be, what the next thing I'm going to do, until I do it. And then, okay, I've committed. Now we're in the middle of it. Here's the next thing we're going to work on. We don't have anything to announce, though. There's nothing right now that I plan on announcing. There's other things we are doing this year. There are courses that need to be updated. There's other products that we plan to bring out to help the training process for you to be easier, to provide you with more flexibility, to provide you with different options. All of this is on the table, and all of these things we will be working on during these next 12 months. I guess now we're down to 10 months in the year. Lots that we want to work on and lots that we want to do. There's nothing specific that I can mention or talk about or talk to, but at least I have some ideas of things that I think would be valuable. Hopefully you will feel the same way when you see them. And what will they be? Well, we won't know until they happen. In my mind, these technologies and products and training materials, these don't exist until they finally exist. And so I try not to talk too much about them until they're finally available to you, because at that point, that's when it really matters. It really doesn't matter that I'm working on it. It really matters if it's available to you. And that's the idea. So it could be CCNA. It could be Pentest Plus. It could be Linux Plus. It could be a lot of things. We don't know until that day finally gets there and we're able to figure out what we want to do. Maybe we'll be something completely different. Well, that's one of the advantages we have. And that's kind of one of the things that in this industry that we tend to do. IT gives you lots of flexibility. It gives you a lot of options. When I started in this industry, there was no internet. So I had no scope of how to implement cloud-based technologies because there was no such thing as a cloud-based technology. Virtual machines were something that we used on the mainframe, but not on our local systems. So we have those technologies now. What's next? What are the next group of useful, important, and interesting technologies to come down the line? We need to be prepared for those as well. So whatever I think about today is probably going to be very different a year from now. And it always is. And it should be, because that's the way that IT works. And to me, that's the value of what we do. That is the value of being in the IT industry, is that you have flexibility. If suddenly one type of technology becomes less competitive or becomes more competitive, and we'd like to get out of that and do something else, we've got that option. And throughout my career, I've done everything from desktop administration, server administration, network admin, security technologies, professional services, systems engineering, and now finally whatever this is. I'm not even sure what kind of name to put on this publishing thing that we do. But that is a really good example of how you get into IT, you learn these technologies, and now you have the flexibility to move in a particular area and do a particular thing, while at the same time being able to financially support yourself and your family. It really is a nice 1-2 combination, and it's one that builds on itself and becomes even more powerful as you spend more time in the information technology field. Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. I think that's a good place to stop. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this Core 2 study group, but we are not done this week. As I mentioned, we have a Network Plus study group on Thursday. So I'm taking Wednesday and not doing a live stream. Thursday, we're back to live stream. Friday, we're planning live streams. There may be other things I know I say this a lot. There may be other things happening in my world that do not allow me to do both of those live streams this week. I hope it does. But if it doesn't, I will make it up. We might do our February study groups in March. We might do 2 of them. I might do a February study group literally in a different month. I'm up for that. If anybody else is, we can do all of those. It works for me. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We'd love to do these live streams. They're so much fun. Hopefully you've learned something from these questions. I've certainly learned things from the things that you put into the chat room and the things you ask of me. So it's a win-win, however we look at it. Come on back Thursday for the Network Plus Study Group. We'd love to see you. Thanks for joining us on this one, and we'll see you next time on the A Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.